So 2023 was a very bad year, if not the worst year of all time for the Walt Disney Company, not just because of the ongoing box office failures that they had, but also how it so happened to have landed on their 100th anniversary year, which only made things even worse for Bob Iger as the Disney CEO and everything related to the board of directors at the time. Now, focusing on 2024 here, we have the next situation, the Acolyte series by Leslie Headland and Kathleen Kennedy, that's already wreaking havoc over at Disney, and why, of course, the board of directors, Bob Iger, are in a state of panic. Let's get into it. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So we all know that Leslie Headland and Kathleen Kennedy will say whatever they have to say to essentially defend this series at all costs, to really defend the Acolyte at its best because of the ongoing backlash that is only worsening over time. There's showing, of course, no signs of a resolution at all. The press tour has been an epic disaster after Charlie Barnett made that major slip of saying Anakin destroyed the Death Star, which, by the way, confirmed what Leslie Headland was saying all along, that they deliberately hired those types of actors and actresses and crew members that knew nothing about Star Wars. Now, focusing away from that, the Disney heads have been going through a very big phase of damage control right now, and exactly what's going on with the Acolyte series in the middle. Now, specifically, of course, we already know that Bob Iger, as I like to call him, Bob Liger, this man will lie through his teeth time and time again about the current status of Disney. But what's interesting here has a lot to do with an emergency meeting related to the Acolyte series, with Bob Iger, the Disney CEO, making one bad call after the other at the Walt Disney Company. One major development now involves more to do with Disney and the Acolyte series, and one major decision that Bob Iger made in the wake of the Acolyte Backlash, showing no signs of slowing down. Both Bob Iger and the board of directors recently had an emergency meeting centered on Lucasfilms' latest feature show on Disney+, the Acolyte series by Leslie Headland and Kathleen Kennedy, where nearly all board members recently agreed with Bob and his decision to immediately cut back on the marketing campaign for the Acolyte at last minute by reducing the TV spots both on the internet and on television by roughly 45%. In addition to this, planned merchandise for the Acolyte is already getting cancelled as we speak after Iger and the board had a lengthy discussion that created so much drama at Lucasfilm that it rattled throughout the entire division. Merchandise for the Acolyte is already getting shaved down by 57%. This includes figurines, sabers, and more related to, of course, the show, and whatever merchandise is produced or that ends up getting produced, the cost of those are also getting shaved down by 25% to create an incentive for any fans or whoever to purchase the merchandise related to the Acolyte. In addition to that, Bob Iger also instructed Kathleen Kennedy and the Lucasfilm Story Group that the press tour will be going through a drastic cutback as well, both before, during, and after the release of the series. This means less interviews and less BTS reels that will be released to the general public as well. The board of directors already reportedly know that this series will be a financial disaster to the dedicated fans, and that is why Season 2 was already pulled immediately. That created pushback from those like Kathleen Kennedy and Leslie Headland fighting Disney and demanding that Season 2 is to be reinstated. This in turn is already creating a divide between Lucasfilm employees and the higher-ups, of course, over at the Disney heads as well. In addition to this, the Acolyte spin-off series that were, of course, going to expand the Acolyte universe, quote-unquote, in the High Republic, are also going through a cancellation phase right now by Iger and the board. This involved more High Republic-centered Star Wars shows that would have been directed by Leslie Headland, that she was also removed and fired from, that was recently finalized. There were going to be a total of 2 spin-off shows for the Acolyte that were planned to actually serve as prequels and explore the backstories of the villains in the main series, while Season 2 was originally planned to jump forward more near the events of The Phantom Menace, with new characters overall. To make matters worse, of Lucasfilm's sake, of course, is that Bob Iger also got the board of directors to approve something crucial to the Acolyte marketing campaign, that Leslie Headland would also be now going under specific instructions on who she will be able to do interviews with and what the subjects will be about. Leslie Headland's interviews with Kathleen Kennedy about the Acolyte are said to also be cancelled for the most part for the marketing campaign, where Disney planned for both Leslie and Kathy to have multiple one-on-one video interviews about the High Republic and the Acolyte storyline. The majority of those have now been axed in a desperate move by Disney to save the press tour disaster with this series overall. Now, let me just say one thing about this, guys, before I get to the big conclusion about what's going on with this emergency meeting that was, of course, put together by Iger and the board about the Acolyte, about Star Wars, about Lucasfilm. This is very revealing, the fact that you have such a scenario happening that's creating so much drama at Lucasfilm that it's rattling throughout the entire headquarters over at Lucasfilm and the story group, and how Kathleen and Leslie are basically raising hell over at Disney over this. It goes to show you that the Acolyte series is that big of a failure, and I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. This is why they held off on releasing the first trailer to the general public for nearly an entire year. Alright, so they dropped it first at Star Wars Celebration, I believe it was, of 2023 in April, correct me if I'm wrong. And they absolutely refused to release it to the general public until just recently, just a couple of months before the release of the Acolyte series. And that was all deliberate, as it turns out. That was a strategy by Bob Iger to keep the backlash at bay, to kind of keep that repressed overall, and it didn't work out for them in the end. If anything, it made it worse. So, moving on, this is where things get interesting, is that the majority of everything happening here also has to do with Bob Iger and the board now fully instructing actors and actresses that are also going under a forced phase to educate themselves about Star Wars after Charlie Barnett's mishap with the overall Acolyte press tour. So, like I said earlier, Charlie Barnett, one of the main cast members of the Acolyte series, said that Anakin Skywalker was the one that destroyed the Death Star. Alright, now look, I know I've said this again many times, but I get it if some actors are uneducated, I get that, but when you have Leslie and Kathy of course, deliberately hiring actors like that know nothing about the franchise and how that was all intentional, that's on them. They were asking for this. They were asking for this press tour to be that much of a failure under Disney's wing, and they shouldn't be all that surprised in the end. Because the Acolyte series, number one, it's inspired by Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi. Number two, it doubles down on the DEI agenda above proper storytelling and proper character development. And most of all, number three, Leslie Headland keeps going on about how the main priority of this series was about representing communities, those of the non-binary community, the LGBTQ community, and a lot of others that just go on and on that were inserted into the show. So overall, I would really love to hear what everyone has to say about Iger's decision behind the scenes, behind closed doors, and what's been going on over at Lucasfilm. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.